My name is Zach Stifler. I'm a active duty officer in the Air Force F-16 fighter pilot and the founder of the Armed Forces Alumni Network out of the University of Cambridge. We have the pleasure to host Talbot Stark. This is a really unique opportunity to hear from Talbot about his upcoming book, and he has 40 years plus of experience. You studied engineering while completing ROTC to become a helicopter pilot in the Army, which is in and of itself very impressive. And then you go on to get an MBA from the University of Cambridge, working in for BNP Paribas as the global head of institutional sales. You worked in Silicon Valley, and now you work as an executive coach, sharing that experience with everyone that needs it. So everyone that's younger than you, you're being so generous to take that time and to share this experience to help the next generation. And you're doing that. You did an excellent job with your book, Elite Performance for Managers. And I loved reading your book. I had the opportunity to do it over a weekend, just as you say in the book, you say this is a guide that's meant to be read over the weekend. And so, you did a really good job of that. Like, I just want to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what led you to write this book.
Sure, Zach. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks everyone for joining us here in the evening, afternoon, or for those West Coasters here in the morning. Uh, Zach, as you said, I've been fortunate and blessed with an amazing life experience and excited to share. However, along the way, there's trials and tribulations. And in essence, what's motivated me is to help other people manage their career. And in essence, really sharing all the lessons I learned. I wish someone would have told me before. So it's really trying to deliver the best career guide I never had. And I think the key thing here, and as you mentioned, from Cambridge students to mid-year career to executives, all of us have achieved an amazing amount of success. We have the Cambridge alumnus or in process, but the game today is different. And as my book is entitled, if you want to be an elite performer, no different than an elite athlete, it becomes a game of finesse. And that's why I really tried to codify this and what I was passionate about. We have the virtual background on, but if you look behind me, I have a number of management books and self help books, like I'm sure many of you have. But one thing I dedicated when I wrote this book is I really wanted to make it actionable. So in each chapter, Zach, and I appreciate you investing your time, there's clear takeaways. So the three pillars, and it starts with you building a better foundation. It's that person you see every day in the mirror. And I go through step by step what that means, both in your personal life, in your career, in your family life. And then with that foundation, it's pillar two. Once you invest in yourself, how can you become a better manager? And the last one, with an intentional pun, is managing your manager. So I'm really passionate about helping people, sharing with people what I've learned. First and foremost, I don't have all the answers, but I've definitely experienced lots of things, been able to model some amazing people in the athletics and military, which you and I share, Zach, in the corporate world. And I try to distill the best lessons over my 40 years so that you can read it over a weekend and start applying.
Yeah. And one of the most impressive things about this book is that it's so simple. I mean, you're writing it in three pillars. And so is it really that simple to change? Is like, what is it? You have a quote in the book that talks about the decision to act is oftentimes the most difficult decision. So is it really that simple to just three pillars?
Zach, I think the three pillars I wanted to be simple, not to be daunting. And actually, we had a lot of debate when we were doing the book design cover. And I was my wife deterred me from making it a mountain because that could seem like you can't accomplish it. So really,
Mhm.
it starts with you. And like you said with Amelia Earhart, I love her quote. But I think in life, a lot of it's putting a stake in the ground. It's accountability. If anyone's ever run a marathon, the first thing they tell you is, tell people. So that's part of it. So, one, it's like Henry Ford said, there's two kinds of people, those who think they can and those who think they can't, right? So it starts with you. And then on the simplicity, I think a lot of it, Zach, is awareness, right? Because that's the thing that was probably galvanized and really why I wanted to write this book, because oftentimes there isn't someone there to tap you on the shoulder to tell you at this point in your career, it's paramount to pivot. You may get there like I did, but what I'm trying to do is really put out the yellow caution flags to say, okay, as far as simplicity, I tried to break down in each of these pillars basically 10 essential steps, 10 actionable items. And I think if you hold yourself accountable, it's simple in concept. Obviously, the application of these things takes time. And I think that's probably, if hopefully one of my goals today is having tangible things from this meeting. So just to finish on that point, Zach, everyone who's listening, it's the critical thing that most of us fall into. I was there at the beginning part of my career. You can be earnest and dutiful and really executing the task, being a subject matter expert, delivering the budget, doing all the right things, but you're in a tactical mode. And here's the trick: your brain helps you because your brain is wired objective, work, result, endorphins, repeat. And I call it nose to the grindstone. What I'm getting at is, if you want to succeed, if you want it back to simplicity, the first and most important thing is you need to dedicate 5 to 10% of your time to strategically managing your career. And what I always tried to do, be it in my military uniform or my time in finance, I never wanted to put good people in harm's way. What do I mean by that? I mean ethical, sound, hardworking, good people. But this is one of the first yellow caution signs. So again, I'd urge you to write it down, because this is the first step as far as simplicity. You need to commit to actually managing your career versus tactically executing your job. And that's the first pivot.
Mhm. Yeah, I love this 5 to 10% of your time devoted to what you call determining your internal GPS, where you want to go in your career. And it reminded me a lot of Winston Churchill, who would devote time to painting outside of his job as prime minister, or President Ronald Reagan, who had naps scheduled into his day just to devote time back to themselves. And so it sounds like you're saying do less. What most people don't want to do less. Like, we need to deliver those results. How do you do this whenever you're so busy?
Yeah, I think that's one of my kind of catchphrases with the clients I work with, is accomplish more by doing less. So I don't urge everyone to go to their boss tomorrow and saying, "Hey, I heard some executive coach said I should do less." So listen carefully to what I'm saying. It's no different. How logical would it be if my goal is to do 20 pull-ups, but it starts with one? Zach and I haven't been in the golf course together yet, but he's a pretty polite guy from our interactions and prepping for the meeting. He may respect my drive and my short game, but he'd probably have a bit of a pause around my putting game. Well, how logical is it for me, if I want my putting game to improve, if I don't put time into it? So, listen, I'll be honest. I think, Zach, you read my book, and a lot of it is pretty much I'm letting my own guard down in my life. I'm not a navel gazing type of person. You're getting to know me. So, this first step for me, as far as being strategic and committing time to manage my career, I can tell you, when I had a coach in the first time, I put a 30-minute block in my very busy day to really not be interrupted except a few people. I shut the door and asked myself, what am I doing? I mean, and it's very uneasy because, again, the nose to the grindstone phenomena is you're doing the right things. The problem is you don't have perspective and self-awareness. So again, it's the courage, and it's 5 to 10%. What I did, and it's going to work differently for everyone, but one of the first things I'd recommend is two things. One, as far as the cadence for me, it was 2 30-minute blocks during the week. And then for me, it was a 1 hour block kind of after family activities before dinner. But before you do all that, as you know, Zach, reading my book, with every client, the first homework, so this applies to everyone on the webinar, you can start tomorrow, meaning be a lawyer with respect and basically track, record how you spend every 30 minutes of your day. And if you want to be excellent, if you want to be elite, start that the moment you get up. And this is what is the most valuable asset we have collectively? It's time. Right, Zach, you get 24 hours, I get 24 hours. Everyone on this webinar gets 24 hours. So what's the difference? We know this intuitively, but here's some litmus test along the way. So the difference is, how do we each spend our time, our 24 hours that we're given? And it starts by first being aware of where you spend your time on a given day. And then there's some things that you and I discussed pre-call that I'm pretty adamant about. If you don't have a morning routine, I'm going to encourage you to start one. And again, I give you simple steps, because here's the deal. The accountability on these things, it starts with you, that person you see in the mirror. And I'll refute people telling me they're not a morning person or whatever it is. Back to the 24 hours. That simply means eat earlier, have some time with your partner or your friends, cut out the binge TV, cut out the emails, and adjust your schedule so you get the 7 to 8 hours. Why do I say 7 to 8 hours? Because the medical and science backing that is, here's less than 7 hours, it shortens your life. More than 9 hours, it shortens your life. So get your 7 to 8 hours. And what I'm driving at, Zach, these are conscious decisions. Yes, there's exceptional times. And I used to think I was getting an arbitrage in life. I was wrong. I used to think that I could survive on less sleep than others. It was self-sabotage. I'm working with a couple of clients right now, a really outstanding female client on the East Coast, very driven. And this is a hard discussion, because you're overworked, you're catching up on emails at night at 11 o'clock at night, you're sleeping 5 hours, you're trying to do all these things. And it's back to controlling this time. So the takeaways here is, one, you have to commit time if you want your career to advance, to evolve. Two, for the next 2 weeks, if you want to accept the challenge, record how you spend your time. If you want to be passionate, if you want to be elite, do that from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And then the next step we'll talk about is, now, what are the metrics? How do you judge where you spend your time and what's important to you? A lot said there, Zach, so I'll pause.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job of explaining that. And something that you're really hitting on is that this takes deliberate practice. Something that you mentioned in your book is the 10,000 hour rule. The average of 10,000 hours, you can develop mastery. But I think that's something that is kind of underlooked whenever you talk about the average of 10,000 hours leads to mastery, is that this is an average. And so you can be at 20,000 hours to develop mastery in whatever you're trying to work at, be it your job or a hobby or with your family, or you could be at 1,000 hours. And honestly, Talbot, I think all of us want to be on that 1,000 hour to mastery. And so what is the differentiator? It's got to be like that deliberate practice. And so something that you said that you do with your new clients is that you have them devote 6 months ahead of time to working with you. And like, why is that? What is this deliberate practice? How do we get to that 1,000 hour versus the 20,000 hour for this mastery?
Sure. I'm doing the best job I can in my book and when I'm coaching with people to shortcut the 40 years it took me to learn these lessons. And hopefully you can read it honestly as acted on a weekend. So hopefully that's one big advantage, because I'm sure I didn't have a roadmap, right? And that's why I'm just passionate about helping people that are willing. Back to Amelia Earhart, the first decision starts with you. I'm sure many of you work for amazing companies, Fortune 500 startups. Maybe you're the CEO and founder, and I work with a lot of clients, and that's a lot of work. Maybe you're serving your country like Zach, but regardless of who you're working for, it's basically you and you alone that are responsible for managing your career. So that's like the first tenet of success. And now, really, the evolution of being a better you. And you mentioned it, Zach, about your innate GPS, the right angle rule. Who is the real you? And this I would really urge, as I do in my book, to take some time to unplug. Zach, you and I share one thing. We're both pilots. So I used to think that, hey, we're trained by the best. I can multitask. This is a competitive advantage I have. And I used to believe that. I was wrong. The evidence is, can we do it? Yes, but your brain operates at the optimal level. It's not used to a continual bombardment of information. And now you don't have to be a pilot to be bombarded with information. We're all guilty of it. But what I'm getting at is take that time, take that 30 minutes, if it's yoga, walk in the park, whatever it may be, to really kind of get in touch with yourself. And it's a practical, and I've seen so many careers prematurely truncated because there's the zeal. I want this promotion. I want to make more money. I want to do this. Great to have goals, but it's so important to be true to the real you. So take that time. I know my strengths and weaknesses, not perfectly, but I knew at different pivot points in my career that if I was going to, maybe it's something, there's a difference between things you can do and things you truly want to do, right? I talk about Bruce Lee. For some of you, it's like be like water. What I'm getting at is those things that come to you naturally, align yourself to that avenue of approach. And I'll just make the last comment. One key pillar, and this is another test that each of you can take away and really apply to your life tomorrow or today, is that ask yourself, if your superiors, your manager and other managers, we're going to describe you, Zach or Talbot, professionally in 3 words, what would they say? The same. What would your peers say about you? What perceptions do they have? What 3 words would they choose to describe you professionally? And same with your team members and subordinates. And now the question is, so here I get it. You're not always going to have perfect information. Maybe in some situations you can have the candor and dialogue with your manager to get that feedback, but intuitively you're going to have a pretty good idea. So many people, and I understand, one, life isn't fair. People have a misperception of who I am, all these things, but it's back to the simplicity of it. What I ask, if you go through that exercise, then what do you want those perceptions to be? What do I want my management to think of me? And then it's dedicating what are the deliberate actions, because you are in control of your perceptions. However, the requirement is that you have to, one, identify the action you're committed to taking to change those perceptions. I'll give you an example. Midway through my career in finance, I was on the trading floor covering clients. I was tenacious, had my nose to the grindstone, really trying to do all the best things I could for my bank. And I realized that if I was going to continue to proceed this way, I was kind of running into my own wall, because everything I was doing, purposefully doing, reinforced the image that I didn't want. Meaning, we think, and this feedback didn't come to me always directly, but indirectly with a bit of EQ, is that, hey, Talbot's a good salesperson, he's a client guy, etc. But these connotations were aligned to my job as a subject matter expert, but in my desire to advance in my career, these weren't good labels. So I had to really think about what deliberate actions am I going to take, because it was simply a matter of awareness and then the commitment, like, okay, from now on in meetings, I'm going to be purposeful with my words. I'm going to make sure some of the clients I was afforded to cover, some of the well-known leading asset managers in the world, I need to draw out what's strategic. So I start to change by my contributions, not in a self-boasting way, but just holding myself accountable to add value in a different way. So hopefully this is making sense, Zach. And that's why,
Mhm.
the yellow flag is out, is that back to strategically managing your career. It's not just doing the job excellent. It's creating that time, hopefully get unplugged, to be strategic about your career. And that little exercise, again, it's thinking, what are the perceptions that people have? Maybe you're an advanced person and those perceptions are exactly aligned to what you want to be. I'll challenge you, push yourself a little bit further. I haven't met anyone perfect yet. I'm far from it. But the idea is awareness. And then with awareness is commitment. The last thing I'll say in that is there's many things we don't control for each of us, for everyone on this webinar. But in my experience, few people maximize the things they do control. And that's a big takeaway. I mean, you can write that down because it's holding yourself accountable. And in doing that, guess what? You change perceptions. And now the simplicity, I tried to provide, the 10 steps in each of these pillars, being a better you, being a better manager, managing your manager. I'll pause there, Zach.
Yeah, and I think that, you did a really good job of explaining this because we can have the best intention in the world, but if that intention isn't met by reality of other people perceiving us with the way that we want to be perceived, then it's kind of irrelevant. And so you and I were lucky in the military that there's this framework that's ingrained into the culture, and that's the debrief, the infamous debrief that many people have probably seen in the movies where the quote unquote ranks come off and you have the general standing next to the young officer and they're both giving each other equal and honest feedback. But from my experience, and I'm sure from a lot of other people's experience, is that this isn't necessarily the case in some or all companies. And so a lot of it does come back to psychological safety. And that's not only something that has become really prevalent, it's become prevalent in the military, it's become prevalent in industry. But how do you develop that psychological safety to have this ranks come off debrief where you can talk to the CEO, you can talk to the VP, you can be open and honest, or you can create that culture where the people that work for you are open and honest and comfortable enough to give you the feedback that you need to develop that real perception.
No, thanks, Zach. Well said. And again, you and I both know the debrief part of our core culture in the military, and it doesn't always and even into the corporate culture. But it's eyes, at least my experience with that person in the person in the mirror. And I, in my career, when I was running global institutional sales, I had globally about 650 salespeople working for me. And what anguished me is too many times, I call it the moment of truth. My assistant would tell me that so and so wants to come by and talk to you, come into my office. And at this point, unfortunately, this was a high performing person that made a choice. They wanted to leave the firm. And I knew it was going to be the moment of truth because we tried to buy them, bid them back, and so on, but they made their decision. So, as you can expect, we'd shut the door and there would be the platitudes of depending if I was part of the hiring process or work closely with them. Hey, it's been thank you for supporting me or whatever the words are. And I love the bank and my role and so on, but we can all anticipate the but. And what anguished me is 8 or 9 times out of 10, what the but was why they made this move to another firm. If we would have been asked, we could have delivered on that in a reasonable time frame. So I asked myself, back to the debrief, how did we get ourselves here in a different debrief, but in this culture, not unique to my bank whatsoever. It, at least I believe, because organizations are just a group of people that are trying to accomplish a common objective, be it in the military, be it in the Air Force, be it at a bank. So I asked myself, how did we get here? And the answer was me. Somehow I didn't facilitate. Most importantly, I didn't invest the time. As you said, Zach, in the military, there's a special focus on this culture because both you and I know the stakes are very high. We can't afford not to debrief because the consequences can be severe. But it's no different if your aims are to be elite, meaning one, you have to create that culture. So that means investing time. It means putting someone in a position of comfort. And you and I were talking about this. Don't have these conversations 2 weeks before reviews or a few weeks before bonus or
Mm-hmm.
mid-year review, because they're probably going to be guarded and it's not going to be genuine. But let's role play for a second, Zach, if you will. And kind of my golden decade of my career, I really did turn things upside down. So we'll role play Zach. And Zach, I think you know the team's budget, the top line revenue objectives this year, it's a 25% improvement. That's our target for 2024. I can tell you, Zach, there's no way the team's going to accomplish this unless we really align everyone's strengths to their contribution. So, Zach, tell me, I've seen you have some amazing skills. You're dynamic on opening new clients, but these are my perceptions. How would you best like to lean in? Tell me what, if you could, describe what you'd like the job to be this year, I'm all yours. Tell me if there's things because in the past you didn't think you were afforded the opportunity to contribute. You're talented with social media. Same thing. If we're going to achieve this goal, I really am trying to make sure that everyone is leaning in where they're most passionate. That's the role play. And I called it ask and then listen, ask and then actively listen. Because so few times, and I was definitely guilty of it, one, to create the debrief honesty culture, you have to put time in so that one, what I found a little technique is hopefully I'm doing now, and it's the truth, is that no one has a perfect career. So that's what I'm trying to give everyone here a jump start to that. But what are the lessons learned? What are my strengths? I learned that I had drive and tenacity, but like I mentioned before, I needed someone to keep me accountable on the way. So to answer your question, Zach, it's I call it you have to give your team member either give them the microphone or give them the pen. Have them write their own job description. Have them tell you where they'd like to contribute. I thought you'd never ask, or I felt uncomfortable saying, hey, my real passion, because, I have a Polish background. I really want to expand in emerging markets, whatever it may be. But to create that debrief culture, it starts again with you now being a better manager.
Yeah, and you did an excellent job of explaining that point, Talbot. I just want to not to cut off the momentum that we have, but if you have any questions throughout, please go ahead and throw them in the chat. We're going to get to questions really soon, and so we'll give everyone an opportunity to ask Talbot questions that you're experiencing, issues that you're experiencing in your career, things you've seen, or if you're interested in learning more about the book or any of the pillars that we've talked about already, please go ahead and throw that into the chat, and we'll get to those really soon. But something that I wanted to go back to, Talbot, is you talk about the commander's intent. And so the commander's intent, for somebody outside of the military, I imagine it could be something very foreign. So could you explain that? How does that contribute to this culture?
Sure, I'll do my best and jump in, Zach, if I'm not on point. But commander's intent is really you, the manager, right? The team leader in the military, it's the commander, right? To being clear. And I would say when people ask me what's the job of a manager, I think probably foremost it's being an excellent communicator. Easy to say, a little more difficult to do. And I'll give you another little test. Remind me, Zach, about a histogram. We'll come back to that. So commander's intent is the clarity of the mission, the clarity of what we're going to do in 2024 with the team I'm leading, the business I'm leading, such that down to the lowest echelon, it's clear on what my expectations are for the end state. I think you maybe read this part in the book, Zach. What I'm getting at for everyone here in the corporate world is I've heard it many times, the scuttlebutt, and sometimes, unfortunately, after my own town hall, is the conversation in the hallway is, what does management want us to do now, or what am I, Zach? What did you get out of it? Or I guess it's just more of the same. So one thing that I found successful, MIT backs this up. The U.S. military backs this up from a long time ago. Most people, on average, can recall no more than 3 to 5 things related to a specific topic. I think in the Air Force, maybe they have the KISS principle, but keep it
Mm-hmm.
simple. So the commander's intent, what I'm getting at, you need to be clear. What I'd advocate, back to knowing you, knowing your manager's goals. And then again, if you're an elite player, your manager's goals. And then what is the mantra? What is the end state that you want everyone to embrace and understand? And that also back to it, it takes feedback. So here's the next exercise if you're being dutiful. So how effective is my commander's intent? How effective am I as a manager? Here's a simple exercise. You can take your team, poll, whatever, depends on the numbers. I've done it in the past, and same thing. I like threes. MIT likes threes. I like to keep it simple. I want to make it 1,000 hours. Maybe we go for 500 hours, Zach. But here's something to really It's good to talk about all these things, but it's also good to put a litmus test to see if you're putting these things into practice. So we're February, right? I'm sure with most places, if it's a fiscal calendar year, unless you're in Japan or other places, that we've had town halls and all the beginning of the year, but ask your employees, what are the three things that you think the team's trying to accomplish? What are the priorities this year? And it's the same thing. There's even software, you've probably seen it. You can type all the words in. It's like a scattergram or a histogram. So here's the important part, Zach, and you and I know this. When we're flying a mission, there's an 8-digit coordinate we have to be on, right? You can't be lack of clarity. But you'll quickly see, back to your mantra, back to how consistently are you delivering the 3 to 5 points you want your team to accomplish. If the feedback comes and it's greatly dispersed, by definition, that means, again, with good intent, many of your team members, I mean, good, ethical, hardworking people, since they don't understand your commander's intent, they're working on things that are not a priority to you. And then again, don't be too hard on yourself. Hopefully you're understanding. First and foremost, I want to bring awareness to these things because it took me a while. Why I fly out and why is someone working on something that I don't think is important? Sometimes I'd be frustrated at the individual. However, in hindsight, I realized it was simply my commander's intent wasn't clear. So again, the simple exercise, it can be formal or informal, but in your sit downs or whatever way, start checking in. We're February, we're a month and a week into the new year. Does everyone really understand how they're going to personalize what the priorities you've laid out for the team? How are they going to embellish it? How are they going to take the deliberate actions so we have everyone going the same way? Otherwise, if we don't have that clarity, by your team is just less efficient because people are putting work into things that aren't a priority. So hopefully that's a tangible thing that you can take away to check out your commander's intent.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm gathering here is that you want to empower your people. You talk a lot about picking the right people, but it's also if you pick the right people, but you don't give them any decision-making power or you micromanage, then you're essentially picking the wrong people because you're not giving them the power that they deserve, that they need. And so it comes down to having a good commander's intent, having standard operating procedures is something that we work with in the military so that you give people that clear vision so that you can set them off and then they can do the work without coming back to you every day, coming back to you and asking questions that they can truck ahead full forward, their nose to the grindstone at least a little bit in that 50%, the 90% of their time to go out and to achieve results. But it starts at the top. And it, I mean, it sounds so simple, but yet it is something that's really difficult to do.
No, exactly, Zach. And again, just to make that principle, empowering people, right? For sure. And I was going to come back on one other point that you mentioned that was interesting. Empowering people for sure, right? But the burden of you want to give people innovation. And remember, my ask is to commit 5 to 10% of your time being strategic. But the big asterisk is absolutely nose to the grindstone. That's 90% of your day, you're 95. So achieving
Mm.
excellence, but it's just preserving that little bit. So you get away, you step back and get some perspective. In the Army, we have this intelligence preparation of the battlefield. And I want to just maybe one really other critical point that it's being a better you and it's being a better manager all in one. I will guarantee you there will come an inflection point in your career where the perception of the how you achieve the results is equal to or greater than the what. Now, there's a little asterisk back to what I said. You have to be performing within the threshold of acceptance, but this is paramount. I'll share a personal story. There could be some former colleagues at the webinar here. I shared my book with my last boss, the global head of global markets, BNP Paribas. And before I could finish that sentence, he finished it, meaning that's so imperative. I'll repeat it because it's so important. It's the being aware of how you are being perceived and how you are accomplishing the result is equal to or more important than the result. And I'll try to tie all this together, right? It means
Hmm.
back to the IPB for any military folks here. That means before we did a mission in the Army, huge preparation, right? Because the stakes are high. What is my liaison? What are my, UK NATO friends doing to my left flank? What's the coordination of fire with my friends in the Air Force? What's the beans, bullets, logistics, operation, personnel, every one of those components. And what I realized in that times when I was frustrated, the knee jerk reaction, you can blame the bureaucracy, you can blame various things. But back to this culture, did I take the time, one, to brief, my boss on some things that can be so clear? And again, they can be excellent things, great things for the firm. But did I make it clear where my ambitions are for my boss? I'm dealing with, it's public now, but I'm dealing with a real world senior client where their bank just decided to sell, their entire Mexican operations. So you can imagine a few months prior, if their well-intended objective was to do everything they can to really help Mexico, maybe their boss couldn't say anything, but they might have directed them somewhere else. So are you communicating your intent as a manager, as a leader, as a better you with your superiors? Do your peers know what you're doing? Because you can quickly, with that tenacity, all laudable qualities. However, you're at risk if you don't invest the time to communicate the why, the how, then you can be labeled as rogue or maybe self-serving or whatever it is. And same with your subordinates. Here's what we're going to do. I want to make sure everyone understands what the end state is. So it's making sure that you don't just focus on the task. You have to bring everyone along. And sometimes that may mean in your mind, you're slowing the cadence or slowing the pace. But Zach, you and I know, I don't think we've ever been to a briefing where the purpose was the speed. I mean, a briefing is to make sure we all absolutely know what we're doing. So that same thing, you don't have to ever even think about wearing a uniform. Zach and I are just something we've shared, but I hope you understand the principle that you really invest this time to bring everyone along. Bring everyone along with that little litmus test I gave you to make sure before doing that, they have clarity of your desired end state. What are we trying to achieve in 2024? And now you're really maximizing it. And as you said, Zach, if they know and you've tested, they know what we're trying to accomplish, you've done the histogram, whatever it is, fully empower them, let them be innovative. And here's the last thing I'll share with you for visualization. So if you spend the time and establish the rapport, the management job, it's a metamorphosis, it changes. And stay with me. So respectfully, each person on your team becomes a unique piece, it becomes a unique puzzle piece. So since I've asked Zach where he wants to lean in and he's excited, he's never been asked before, like what he really wants to do. And there's a couple things, and sometimes you get blown away because they're like, I'd like to do this. I want to do more social media. And I wish I'd have, you're like, okay, you're writing it all down. You know why? Because I never asked. But here's the fun thing as a manager is that if you can see me, the challenge of the manager is how do I integrate, how do I bring these pieces of the puzzle together to achieve our objective? Now, to be clear, you as a manager are still underwriting this objective. That's still on you, but hopefully with purposeful and deliberate actions, you're better aligning their team. You're not just assuming because you had a 22-page PowerPoint presentation that everyone understands. It's really that clarification. It's making sure that you coordinate your IPB. Does everyone, do my peers, do my superiors, do my subordinates understand? And then let them go. So hopefully you're getting a little bit more excited about what we think about as classic management.
Yeah, and Talbot, you've done a really great job of explaining pillars one and two, being a better you, being a better manager. Let's dig into managing your manager now. I mean, this is something you kind of alluded to, but this was a completely new concept to me. I did a little bit of research and found Jocko Willink, a Navy SEAL, talks a little bit about the same thing in his book, Extreme Ownership, leading up and down the chain of command. But this isn't something that I've really heard about that much. Like, how would you explain managing your manager?
Yeah, there's two things. So first, not everyone may agree with me, but fundamentally, I believe most things in life are as simple or as difficult as one wants to make them. Most things. This this example, managing your manager, exactly fits the mold. And let me explain. Probably it's unprecedented in today's times that the unknown for you and I, Zach, and you can imagine unknown for your manager. And honestly, I've worked for amazing managers, good managers, average managers, maybe not so average managers. I can tell you one thing, these rules apply to any manager. So first, it's be that constant in their world of the unknown, be that constant. And for me, that means two words: amazingly predictable. Be amazingly predictable. Now, again, this hurdle, and I'm working with clients, I'm sure some readers, there may be some pushback. So, to be clear, I mean everything within an ethical context. But to visualize this, it is putting your boss, him or her, in a wood cart, and it's pushing them up the hill to help them succeed. And not in a self-boasting way, but in an altruistic way. And same as we've been talking, we know in debriefs, it's about being authentic and genuine. It's that same thing. Trust me, as a manager, very rarely do you fool anyone, right? It's I know this person is doing everything they can to help, the team in me. And here's a good example. It's conscious choices that we make. I run global teams, so there's no excuse today if I see you, Zach, or not. If you're in my office in London, you're out in Hong Kong, wherever it may be. But there's a conscious choice. There's the person where Zach may come up to me and say, "Hey, it's been a long week. I'm just getting ready to head out, boss, but I wanted to check in. Anything I can help with over the weekend before I head out or not?" Do you have to do this? No. But you know what happened? Because the other thing, the 10 essential steps, remember, your boss today is a person just like you. They have good days and bad days. Generative AI isn't your boss yet. So remember that. And here's the difference: what you don't know, and you wouldn't know, but your boss just got side railed with a 6 hour meeting that ate up her or his entire day, and they have a big to do on Monday. So by you reaching out, and you have to be able to back that up, that could encroach upon your weekend plans, understood. But you know what? Your boss was going to have that burden, and you're someone who's going to step up and, again, be predictable and being genuine and reaching out. We're all familiar with the Pavlovian Russian experiment. I talk about it in my book. We're better than dogs, but here's the idea: is that, you know what? If you want something done, the old saying goes, go to the busiest person. If I know Zach is coming to me on a Friday, putting his hand out after a tough week, that means a lot to me. So you know what happens next time when I'm thinking about something like, hey, Zach, we got our quarterly results. I really want to change the faces of who we're seeing or who's out there presenting. I want you to do the town hall. I think you're a great example. You shared with me that you really want to open new clients. I finally listened. You deliver that on 24. The moment is yours. So I call it push and pull, meaning if you're genuinely helping someone, if they're integral into your contribution is integral to their success. Listen, I recognize life isn't always fair. I'm not saying they're going to profess that Zach's done this at every town hall and so on, but rest assured, if if you're really helping, if you're really invaluable, when they get elevated, they're going to pull you along, because I needed my COO to make sure the things I wanted to do were implemented. I need Zach because we have grander ambitions in 2025. So people have asked me, well, Talbot, that's a lot of work, and what are the benefits to me? So I'll be candid. One, in times like this, as we've seen in the first quarter, in the technology sector and others, we're seeing layoffs, and those are real and difficult situations. And I have many clients I'm talking to that experiencing these things now. Not in every case, but if you're someone who's demonstrated, one, the willingness, two, the capacity, when I'm forced to reduce headcount by 10 or 15%, you better believe I'm going to reach out to the people that have demonstrated they have 120% of capacity, because I have less resources and I still are going to have the same or even a greater mission. So when times are difficult, you're going to with deliberate actions, people know that, hey, I can count on Zach. I know he'll do the right things. I know not just what he says in lip service, but when I need something, he's there and he backs me up. I want him on my team when times are tough. On the flip side, you're in a growth industry. I have some fintech clients. It's great. You know what? That innovative, driven person that's asking me how I can help and so on. He has so much energy and insight. This is all a bit new to me. Hey, in this particular sector, I want to bring him or her along because they're adding value. So that's what's so important about managing your manager. And this is the fallacy, right? In that sometimes people think all the things I mentioned, there's going to be a variant of managers you work for, but I guarantee you, if you instill this mindset, if you're truly looking to help someone, again, you may not get all the recognition you feel you deserve, but back to the perceptions, people will see this. And you don't have to be posting it. You don't have to be telling people. They will see it, be it in the virtual work from home world or in the office. People understand which people are leaning in and which people are being amazingly predictable.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Talbot. I mean, I know that you could talk all day about this. Your passion towards this work and your book is truly incredible. We talked for over an hour yesterday, easily, about this topic just in preparation. But I just want to give us ourselves an opportunity to open it up to see if there's any questions out there before we can continue. We can continue talking about this. You can continue to talk about the book. I have a few more questions myself, but I really want to bring the crowd in here. So if you have a question, like, we're going to
Nice.
take a moment, please just send that in the chat container, and so that we can address that.
I hope no one's shy. It's free. It's free advice. So
Thanks, Major Bob. And we got a few coming in here. Talbot, do you see the ones that are coming in the chat container here?
oh, sorry. I let me I gotta switch. Um Fire away. I'm not oh, I see. Okay. I know Major Bob. Oh man, your past can haunt you on these things.
And so one of the questions we have is, what if the work is very hectic? How do you get that half an hour to reflect? How do you find that time?
So I went through it quickly. Good question, fair question. And that's probably one of the common things that when I ask people, almost everyone acknowledges they should do it, but they don't. Again, the difference between knowing and doing. So back to that exercise, right? For 2 weeks, record how you spend every half hour of your day. And I would really encourage you to do it from the moment you wake up. So finding those 30 minutes, one, it is usually what I'll do with a client. They'll do that for 2 weeks and we'll kind of debrief on this. And without fail, every time it's really raises awareness. People will see intuitively their own patterns and what they need to change. So you're looking at how you spend the most valuable asset you have. And then it's decisions, right? I understand. Trust me, in a bank, there are a lot of meetings I was hosting, and et cetera, et cetera. But I always think about it. Think about your boss's boss or wherever you are in your organization or going all the way up to the CEO. You know, definitely those people are going to be busier than you, right? And I can tell you, many more people than you probably know or acknowledge spend that time really strategically managing their career. So start with something that's manageable. Find a meeting that you can empower one of your team members to attend. Meetings you host, see if you can make it end 15 or 30 minutes earlier. See if you can make it a bi-weekly versus a weekly. Whatever it is, set a short-term goal of just finding 2 half-hour segments. Same. Listen, the reality, depending on your job and work-life balance, is important. But for me, one of the things that really crystallized and helped me in my career was Sunday. Sunday, everything I say in the book and we discussed today, I unplugged. I was upstairs in my office and really mark to market in the finance world. How was I doing on my life performance matrix, which we didn't come to, but on the 3 to 5 objectives in my 4 things in my life, what happened that week? What do I need to focus on? So again, start with spreadsheet, notebook, whatever way works for you. Record how you spend your time, and then you need to make some decisions. But start just finding an hour. I can guarantee you can find an hour. And same, if you're too busy, then something's wrong, because if managing your career is important, then you have to reprioritize things. So hopefully that's something that's tangible. And it's every client I work with, that's one of the first exercises to accomplish that. Because I'm working with someone right now in London. The requirement is we have to commit to either a half hour every week or an hour every 2 weeks, or there's no engagement. So it's again the commitment, putting that stake in the ground. So hopefully that's a tangible action you can take.
Yeah, that was great. And then we have another question from Mark. Yeah, can you say a bit more about culture? Any advice on how to build culture? For example, if you want more honest feedback, but the culture is too compliant. And then Victoria goes into the same type of question where she says, how do you strike the balance between fostering psychological safety and being suitably assertive? So whenever you're trying to build that culture, how do you strike this balance?
So, and it's a good question, right? So I think what I'll extrapolate a little bit more on being a better manager with investing the time, is Zach and I were role playing, but really giving them the pen, or being an active listener, asking first and then listening. Here's the powerful thing, in that I'll be honest with everyone here, I struggle with delegation for a good portion of my beginning of my career. Not because I didn't know what the word meant, but I was paranoid about the quality and reputation and so on. But I failed to entrust and establish that culture. Um, but here I think, to really change that culture, is when you ask someone where they want to lean in, and again, you have to establish that rapport so they really feel at ease to discuss with you. Inherently, most logical people aren't going to lean in with something that they're not driven or passionate about, or they pride themselves in thinking, that's one of their best skills, back to their GPS. Now, however, I want to be clear, right? Because the world's not perfect. So at least you one undoubtedly you remove the resentment phenomena, right? Why doesn't everyone ask me? My boss never asked me. This is what I always wanted to do. This was the moment of truth for me. Too many times someone would come to my office, and it would simply be like, oh, I always wanted to live in Asia, and my wife is Asian, and you move someone else there, and I wish it would have been me. There's a lot more to talk about that, but I never knew that. I could never enable that, right? So you with asking first and then listening, at least if people are going to be intellectually honest, no guarantees, but hey Zach, where do you want to be your next, where do you want to be deployed next, right? The Air Force, you can tell me a little bit more how they maybe they can buy my book. So but the point is, you still underwrite the quality control, which was my paranoia, and if there's people that work with me on the webinar, they know that. But what changed my last decade of life is that I could, so the integrity, the interaction that we had, since they were defining their objectives kind of aligned to their strengths, the conversation was subtle difference. But here's the important thing, right? Is that, hey Zach, I you know I'm 100% behind you, and I know you have amazing skills and opening new clients. So January's been tough, a lot of headwinds and so on. What can I do? How can I help you? So it's you're not forcing them into something where they didn't think they had any contribution. It wasn't just delegated. Here's your objectives, maybe a little to and fro. So it's that balance, and hopefully I'm answering the question, is that you eliminate the resentment, and then in your one-on-ones or whatever form you have, hopefully you recognize this as a strength, and it can be more of a coaching dialogue. And I think on integrity, listen, finding establishing that more honest dialogue, right, that has to be done in the appropriate way. But everything I'm speaking about is in a professional context, right? It's just simply asking, hey, what would you like to do? How would you like to best contribute to the success of the team this year? So hopefully, again, you are responsible for investing the time, establishing the trust, and then listening. And then on the iterative approach, it's really now, since hopefully they're doing what they asked or professed they wanted to do, you can see how can you help them succeed in doing what they want to do versus
Mhm.
the resentment of like, I never signed up for this, I didn't want to do it in the first place, so you're here. So hopefully those tips can help you forge ahead.
Yeah, really well said, Talbot. Thank you for that. And I know that we could continue talking about this probably for another hour, probably for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. I want to be respectful to everyone's time, especially you, Talbot, for taking this time, this hour to share your insights with us. Just for the few remainder of the questions in here that I'm looking at now, if you go and read the book, or you're going to see the morning routines. He gives a couple more examples of morning routines in the book, and then also there's a lot of really good information in there, and a lot of these questions will be asked whenever the book comes out on the 13th. So don't feel shorted that we didn't have the opportunity to reach to him. Talbot talks a lot of it about this information in the book as well. And just before we go, do you have any closing thoughts, Talbot, that you want to leave everybody with?
Sure. Listen, thanks for everyone's time. I really appreciate it. I'm passionate about sharing and helping people. Just from all the things that I've learned that I wish someone had told me before, I'm trying to tell you now. And as Zach said, hopefully in a time effective way. For those of you that will be in Cambridge, I think I'll be back to Cambridge June 20th and 21st for the Future Forum. I lead a global executive coaching practice. So we're helping folks from the newly entering the management world to executives. I'll make one note. I've just been humbled on how lonely, how taxing, how uh, you know challenging it can be to be an entrepreneur or small, medium-sized company. So I spent a lot of time with clients there. As Zach kindly said, my book will be globally launched on Amazon February 13th. As a veteran, I'm passionate about the Wounded Warrior Project. So reach out, help yourself. For every book sold, I'm donating on launch day to the Wounded Warrior Project. I'm excited. I hope you took some copious notes, and there's 5 or 6 tangible actions you can take today that hopefully will put you on your path to change your life, your career, and destiny. Any other questions, feel free to look at our website. It's www.execpathfinders.com. It gives you some examples of what we do in the real world, and hopefully you have some great takeaways. I wish everyone a really successful 2024, and make that choice today, not some day, but day one, to being an elite performer. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Talbot, and thanks to everyone that joined us today. I just want to leave with this quote that we mentioned earlier by Amelia Earhart, and she says that the most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. Fears are paper tigers. You can do anything you decide to do. You can act the change and control your life, and the procedure, the process, is its own reward. And so, make today day one as you go out, take some of the tools that you learned from this webinar. I hope that you can also pick up the book, because there's even more tools in there. And it's an action guide, step by step, that'll help you change your life, from reading it on the weekend to changing how you act on Monday when you go back into work. So thank you, Talbot. Thank you to everyone that's joining us. Just again, we are the Armed Forces Alumni Network from the University of Cambridge and Cambridge Judge Business School. If you know any service members who have graduated from the University of Cambridge, please help us by sending them our LinkedIn group or email. We'll provide all of this information in an email following this. So we'll get the Exec Pathfinders website out there. We'll get a link to the book. We'll also put in LinkedIn accounts for Talbot and myself if you want to get in contact with us or ask any questions following this webinar. And we'll also provide a short Google form in there to get some feedback, because we're all trying to be better managers, better people ourselves, just as Talbot talks about. And so this is an opportunity that we can do that, so we can improve for next time. So thanks everybody for joining, and especially thank you, Talbot, for taking this time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great lunch, great evening, great morning, depending on where you are, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.